There's also a sense that somehow the Secret Service is dropping the ball here. They let some guy climb on a roof not far from a rally last time. This time, you've got a guy lurking in a bush for 12 hours on a Trump golf course. Something's not right about this story.
The assassination attempts of Donald Trump or the arrest of the guy with the gun in the golf course, however you want to describe it, is going to be seen in the context of the Ukrainian situation, bearing in mind his pro-Ukrainian declarations that he's made. How significant do you think what has happened over the last 48 hours has been for America's position on Ukraine?
I think that the connection of the alleged assassin to Ukraine is complicated. He went to Ukraine. Apparently, he was told, no, you're not going to fight for us. My understanding is that he was deemed to be mentally unstable. And so I don't think this is seen as somebody who was going after Trump because of his position on Ukraine. I think this is a guy who probably was not all put together. To hide in a bush to shoot a former president, I think that speaks for itself.
And therefore, do you think that we'll get on the general Trump position on Ukraine in a moment, because that is interesting in itself, 2 months out of an election, but you think this probably won't have an effect then, that he's almost going to be dismissed correctly as someone with his own mental difficulties rather than someone who feeds into the politics or the geopolitics of Ukraine?
Yeah, I think that the connection is too remote. And in some ways, I think the first attempt on Trump's life was good for his electoral fortunes, in the sense that, he emerged defiant, pumped his fist in the air, had blood running down his ear. This did not, as far as we know, involve any shots fired at the former president. I don't see this as having a big impact upon the campaign.
Really, and how's it affected the narrative generally about the two campaigns? Because we had the debate, which went very badly for Trump. I think everyone would agree that Kamala Harris having quite a good couple of months. Is this just a minor bump in the road, really? I mean, there is an issue that it occurs to lots of people in this country. You have a big country in America, 400 million guns, a very polarized political discourse, a very, very tight race. We've not seen an election as close as this for some time. All of that points to worries that violence might creep into the electoral process. How fair a concern is that, do you think?
I think what happened at the golf course just reinforces the sense among Americans that all is not well, and that we are living in a society that's deeply fractured. I think there's also a sense that somehow the Secret Service is dropping the ball here. They let some guy climb on a roof not far from a rally last time. This time, you've got a guy lurking in a bush for 12 hours on a Trump golf course. Something's not right about this story. Now, how that plays in terms of electoral politics is difficult to say. On the one hand, you could say, listen, there's a whole lot of chaos out there. We don't want Trump a chaos maker. On the other hand, you could say, something's not right here. We need a change. Kamala Harris is the vice president. This is happening on the watch of Biden and Harris. We need something new. So I think it's difficult to game this out in terms of its electoral implications.
We had people on our program yesterday. I mean, some who are very party pre who would say this, but this was also said by more moderate figures as well over the course of yesterday, that the Democrats have pitched Trump as this threat to democracy, this actual danger to the well-being of the republic. And therefore, effectively, this eliminationist rhetoric they use somehow fosters violence. And every time they call Trump a threat, every time they bring up the capital, they are effectively saying, look, this man's a danger to democracy and needs to be stopped. And needing to be stopped carries with it all sorts of potential implications. What do you make of that as an argument? Because I've heard it more than once in the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I don't think it stands up. I don't think it's a valid argument, because for those people who find that appeal to democratic norms and to the rule of law a reason not to vote for Trump, those are not the people who are going to go out and get an AK-47 and go hide in a bush, right? The folks who are going after Trump, who are trying to shoot him, are whack jobs. I don't think they're sitting around listening to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris talk about the threat that Trump poses to democracy. And I have to say that I think when Trump and Harris say that, all they're doing is stating the obvious, right? This is a guy who attempted to overthrow the 2020 election without a shred of evidence. This is a guy who has said he's going to turn the Justice Department against his political opponents. I do think that it is important to speak in a straightforward manner about Trump's possible threats to American democracy.
We started off talking about Ukraine, so maybe we should finish with Ukraine as well, Charles. That Donald Trump was right about NATO in many people's minds. He says all sorts of things, and he's a straight shooter, sometimes a very wild shooter, as it were, in his opinions. But a lot of people, a lot of very serious people on this side of the Atlantic and on your side of the Atlantic would say he's been right about NATO. NATO has been coasting, clinging to the coattails of America for decades. And actually, if Europe is serious about its own safety, it needs to get its act together. He said that in very clear terms. Most people agree with him, actually, who are defense people. So what he says about Ukraine, there will have to be some sort of settlement. People will have to take seriously, I guess. Now, what do you make of, say he gets into power, how much will he care? How much will he act? How much will he really push Putin? What does an arrival of Trump actually mean when it comes to the situation around Russia and Ukraine specifically?
Well, I don't agree that Trump was right about NATO. I mean, I think Trump was right to press NATO allies to spend more in defense, because Europe has not shouldered its fair share. That having been said, talk about withdrawing from NATO, not defending NATO allies, that strikes me as way out there, and a statement that threatens the core solidarity of the West. So I think he goes too far. When it comes to Ukraine, I would say there's a good bit to like and even more to dislike about Trump's position. What I like about it is that he's honest. He is simply accepting the reality that Ukraine is not going to win this war. And the British government, the US government, the Ukrainian government, other governments keep talking about a Ukrainian victory. It ain't going to happen, right? Ukraine doesn't have the manpower or the firepower to defeat Russia. So I think we need to have an honest, sober conversations with our publics, and I think Trump is right to do that. Where I think he goes wrong is essentially by saying, well, I'm going to throw Ukraine under the bus. I don't want to keep sending military and economic assistance to Ukraine. And that's because that is an invitation for Putin to keep going. In my mind, the way this war stops is that you give Ukraine the economic and military assistance that it needs to hold its own for the foreseeable future, making it clear to Vladimir Putin that he's not going to be able to conquer the country, that he's not going to be able to break through the fortified front lines that the Ukrainians are building. Then he may say, okay, I've lost several 100,000 Russians. I've gained a little bit. I'm not going to gain more. It's time to call it a day. Yeah. And then I do think we will get a negotiated settlement. We will get a ceasefire. But we're not going to get there by throwing the Ukrainians under the bus. We're going to get there by giving the Ukrainians the wherewithal to hold their own and sending a message to Putin, you're not going to get any further.
Really interesting stuff. Charles, great analysis. Fascinating to speak to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.